For 27 years, my world was a tiny, perfect sphere, and its name was Amelia. Every sunrise, my hands, stained with the rich, dark soil of other people's gardens, were working for her. I was a gardener, you see. Not the kind you see on television, with pristine gloves and a charming straw hat. I was the kind with dirt permanently etched into the lines of my palms, with a constant ache in my lower back and knees that clicked and groaned with every bend. But that ache, that dirt, it was a sacrament. It was the physical manifestation of my love for her. I remember when she was little, I'd come home smelling of earth and roses, and she would bury her face in my work clothes and say I smelled like the whole world. That was my world, her tiny arms around my neck, her complete and utter faith in me. Her father left when she was 2, a ghost of a man who couldn't handle the reality of responsibility, and from that day on, it was just the two of us against everything. Every penny I earned from trimming hedges, from pulling weeds, from planting flower beds for people who had more money than they knew what to do with, it all went into a jar labeled Amelia's Future. That jar bought her the best school uniforms, even if mine were patched at the elbows. It paid for tutoring in math, a subject that always made my head spin, so it wouldn't hinder her. It sent her on school trips I could only dream of, to cities with museums and monuments I had only ever seen in books. I sacrificed without a second thought, because I wasn't just building a life for her. I was building a fortress of opportunity that would protect her from the kind of life I had, a life of sweat and toil, and being invisible to the people you serve. She was bright, my Amelia. She soaked up every opportunity, like a thirsty plant. She got into a good university, and I took on more gardens working weekends, my hands sometimes cracking and bleeding from the cold and the constant moisture. I'd send her care packages with her favorite cookies and the last of my savings for the month, and she would call and tell me how much she loved me, how one day she would pay it all back. I never wanted it back. Seeing her succeed was the only payment I ever needed. She met Richard in her final year. He was from a family that owned things, buildings, companies, legacies. When she first brought him home to my tiny, 2-bedroom cottage, I could see the shock in his eyes, quickly masked by a polite smile. He looked at my worn furniture, my simple, handmade curtains, the way a person might look at a museum exhibit on poverty. Amelia was nervous, flitting around, apologizing for the lack of space, for the smell of compost that always clung faintly to the air. I made his favorite meal, which Amelia had told me was a complicated French dish. I spent 2 days' wages on ingredients and followed a recipe from a library book. He ate it with perfect manners and commented that it was surprisingly authentic. I didn't know then that this was the beginning of the end, the first crack in the world I had built. The wedding planning began, and I was slowly, methodically, pushed to the margins. It was all handled by Richard's mother, a woman with a voice as sharp and cold as breaking glass. The conversations were about venues I couldn't afford to enter, about guest lists filled with names I couldn't pronounce. Amelia would call me late at night, her voice a strained whisper, telling me about the latest argument with her future mother-in-law over the color of the napkins. I would listen, offer my support, and tell her everything would be beautiful. I just wanted her to be happy. The day it all shattered wasn't a loud, dramatic explosion. It was a quiet, precise demolition of my soul. Richard's mother had insisted on a final dress fitting at a high-end boutique in the city, and she had, through gritted teeth, insisted I be there. I took the day off, a day's pay I couldn't afford to lose. I spent an hour scrubbing my hands, trying to get the last of the dirt from under my nails. I wore my best dress, a simple floral print I had owned for 10 years, the one I saved for church on Easter. When I arrived, the air in the boutique was thick with the scent of perfume and money. Richard's mother and her friends were there, all dressed in elegant, neutral tones, their laughter like the chiming of tiny, expensive bells. Amelia was standing on a small pedestal, a vision in white silk and lace. She was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. My heart swelled with so much pride I thought it might burst. I walked toward her, my eyes tearing up. "Oh, my darling," I whispered. "You look like an angel." She didn't smile. She glanced over my shoulder at Richard's mother, a flicker of panic in her eyes. Then she looked back at me, at my dress, at my hands, which I was clasping in front of me, at my face, weathered by years of working under the sun. Her voice was low, almost inaudible, but every word was a perfectly aimed dart. "Mother, please," she hissed. "Don't. Just stand in the corner or something. Richard's grandmother is here. Please, don't ruin my wedding with your peasant face." Peasant face. The words hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. The quiet chatter of the other women stopped. I could feel their eyes on me, their polite smiles turning into masks of pity and contempt. I looked at my daughter, my Amelia, the little girl who used to say, "I smelled like the whole world." I saw a stranger with cold eyes and a cruel mouth, wearing the face of my child. My world, that tiny, perfect sphere, didn't just crack. It imploded, leaving nothing but a black, silent void. I turned without a word and walked out of the boutique, the tinkling bell on the door sounding like a death knell. I didn't cry. I was too far gone for tears. I felt hollow, scraped out, a vessel that had been emptied of everything it ever held. That was the day my life, the one I knew, ended.
Naquele momento, meu chão desapareceu. Foi a dor mais profunda que já senti. Se você já passou por uma grande decepção e entende o que é ter o coração partido, por favor, curta este vídeo para eu saber que não estou sozinha nesta jornada.
The weeks that followed were a blur of gray. I went to work, my body moving on autopilot. I'd pull weeds, trim roses, my hands performing the familiar tasks while my mind was 1,000 miles away, trapped in that white, sterile boutique, hearing those words over and over again. Peasant face. It was a brand, a judgment, a final verdict on my life's worth. Amelia had called once, a stiff, formal conversation where she said she was stressed and didn't mean it like that. I didn't have the energy to argue. I just listened, a hollow echo on the other end of the line. She told me not to come to the wedding. She said it would be better for everyone, that it was a high society affair and I would feel out of place. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. She was erasing me, the embarrassing, dirt-stained mother who didn't fit into her new, shiny life. So I stopped. I stopped working. I stopped eating. I stopped leaving my little cottage. What was the point? The future I had poured my entire being into had rejected me. The garden in my own backyard, once my pride and joy, began to wither. The weeds crept in, choking the life out of the flowers, a perfect metaphor for the despair that was strangling me. My savings dwindled. The money I had put aside for a new roof, for my own old age, was gone. It had all gone to her, to the university fees, to the down payment on her first car, to the life that had taught her to be ashamed of me. I was at the bottom of a well, the light a tiny, distant pinprick I had no strength to climb towards. I was going to lose my house, the last piece of the world I had built. The days bled into one another, distinguished only by the shifting of light across the dust-covered floor. One rainy afternoon, staring at a final demand notice for the mortgage, I felt a profound and terrifying emptiness. My life had been a singular purpose, and that purpose was gone. I was nothing. A ghost in my own home. It was in that moment of absolute surrender that I decided to clean. Not for any reason, just to do something. To move. I started with the attic, a place of forgotten things, of dust and memories. I pulled open old trunks, the scent of mothballs and aging paper filling the air. There were my old school reports, my husband's few remaining letters, Amelia's first pair of shoes. It was all pain. I was about to close the last trunk when my fingers brushed against a small, leather-bound book. It was my grandmother's, Nonna Sofia. She had come from a small village in the Italian countryside, bringing with her a wealth of knowledge that the modern world had deemed useless. She was a woman who could read the weather in the clouds and knew which herbs could cure a fever. I always thought of her as magic. I opened the book. The pages were brittle, filled with her elegant, looping script. It was her recipe book. But it wasn't just for cakes and pastas. It was filled with recipes for herbal remedies, for soaps, for tinctures. And there, on a page yellowed with age, was a recipe I vaguely remembered from my childhood.
Elixir di nonna.
Grandma's elixir. It was for a liqueur made from elderflowers, wild honey, and a blend of secret herbs she would forage for in the woods at dawn. I remember the smell of it, a sweet, floral, almost mystical aroma that filled the house when she would make it in a large copper pot. She used to say it was a taste of sunshine, a cure for a sad heart. My family had never been wealthy, but we had this. a tradition, a secret passed from mother to daughter. A secret I had dismissed as old-world nonsense in my rush to give Amelia a modern life. I sat there, on the dusty floor of my attic, holding this book. It felt heavy, solid. It was a piece of my history, of the women I came from, the peasants. I thought of Nana Sophia, her face as wrinkled and beautiful as a dried apple, her hands as strong and capable as my own. She was never ashamed. She was proud of what she could create from the earth. A small, fragile thought, no louder than a whisper, entered my mind. What if? What if I could make it? I had nothing left to lose. My house was nearly gone. My daughter was a stranger. My heart was in pieces. But my hands, these hands that Amelia was so ashamed of, they knew the earth. They knew how to be patient. They knew how to nurture something and help it grow. I took the book downstairs. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something much smaller, much more fragile. It was a single spark in the suffocating darkness. It was the first step away from the edge of the well. That night, for the first time in months, I didn't dream of the boutique. I dreamed of my grandmother, her hands moving deftly, crushing herbs, the air thick with the scent of summer flowers. I woke up before dawn, the dream still clinging to me like a warm blanket. I found a basket, put on my old boots, and walked into the woods behind my cottage, just as Nana Sophia used to do. The world was quiet, draped in a cool, silver mist. I felt a sense of purpose I thought I had lost forever. Finding the ingredients was like a treasure hunt guided by ghosts. I recognized the elderflower bushes from my childhood, their lacy, white blossoms heavy with dew. I found the wild mint and the lemon balm growing near the creek, their scent sharp and clean in the morning air. It was as if my grandmother was walking beside me, pointing the way. The recipe was complex, more alchemy than cooking. It spoke of timings based on the phase of the moon, of steeping the herbs in a specific sequence, of using only rainwater collected in a ceramic bowl. It sounded like madness, but I followed it to the letter. I had no copper pot, only my largest stainless steel soup pot, but I sterilized it until it shone. My first attempt was a disaster. The liqueur was bitter, the color a murky brown. It tasted like disappointment. I almost gave up then, and there, the spark flickered, threatening to go out. But then I looked at my hands, stained now with petals and herbs instead of just dirt. These were not the hands of a victim. They were the hands of a creator. I tried again. And again. I tweaked the process, learning the feel of it, the intuition that the book couldn't teach. I spent weeks experimenting, my little kitchen transformed into a fragrant laboratory. My dwindling savings were almost gone, spent on sugar, on glass bottles, on yeast. I was running on fumes, on a desperate, stubborn refusal to completely disappear. On the fourth try, something shifted. The color was a beautiful, pale gold, like liquid sunlight. The aroma that filled the kitchen was exactly as I remembered it, sweet, complex, with a hint of citrus and wild herbs. I let it ferment, watching it bubble and change, a living thing. When it was finally ready, I poured a tiny amount into a glass. My hand was trembling. I brought it to my lips and took a sip. It was magic. It tasted of sunshine, of misty mornings, of my grandmother's love. It was the taste of home. For the first time since that day in the boutique, I wept. Not tears of sorrow, but tears of release, of a profound, soul-deep recognition. I had made something beautiful. From the dirt, from the weeds, from the forgotten knowledge of my peasant ancestors, I had created gold. I bottled the liqueur in a dozen small, clear glass bottles, handwriting a simple label, Elixir de Sophia. I took them to the local farmer's market, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and fragile hope. I set up a small table between a man selling oversized zucchini and a woman selling goat cheese. People walked by, barely glancing at my humble display. Hours passed. I felt invisible all over again. Then, an elderly woman with kind eyes stopped. She picked up a bottle, studying the golden liquid. "What is this, dear?" she asked. I explained, my voice shaky, telling her the story of my grandmother. She asked for a small taste. I poured a sample into a tiny paper cup. She sipped it, and her eyes closed. A slow smile spread across her face. "It tastes," she said, her voice filled with wonder, "like a memory I forgot I had." She bought 2 bottles. That was my first victory. It wasn't about the 20 euros she paid me. It was about the look in her eyes. The connection. I had given her more than a drink. I had given her a feeling. I had helped someone, just for a moment, remember something beautiful. That small success fanned the spark into a flame. I came back every week, and slowly, people started to notice. They would come for a taste and leave with a bottle and a story. Then came the turning point. A man in a chef's coat, who I later learned was the owner of the most exclusive farm-to-table restaurant in the region, tasted the elixir. He was silent for a full minute, swirling the liquid in his cup. Then he looked at me, his expression one of pure astonishment. "I have never tasted anything like this," he said. "It's authentic. It has a soul." He bought my entire stock. He wanted to feature it on his dessert menu, to pair it with his finest creations. The next week, an article appeared in a regional food magazine. It was about the miraculous rediscovered elixir being served at this famous restaurant. It mentioned a mysterious local artisan, the keeper of a lost family secret. My phone started ringing. Small gourmet shops, online retailers, even a distributor from the city. They all wanted Elixir de Sofia. I was no longer just surviving, I was building something. I hired a local girl to help me with bottling and labeling. I took out a small business loan, using my new orders as collateral, to buy proper equipment. My little cottage, the place of my deepest despair, was now a bustling hub of creation and purpose. I was no longer Amelia's mother, the invisible gardener. I was Sophia, the woman who made liquid sunshine.
Foi ali, com as minhas próprias mãos, que comecei a reescrever a minha história. Deixei de ser a vítima e me tornei a autora do meu destino. Se a minha jornada de superação está te inspirando, inscreva-se no canal para acompanhar os próximos capítulos e fazer parte desta comunidade de recomeços.
The success felt like a dream, but a dream forged in hard labor. The days were long, starting before dawn in the woods and ending late at night, surrounded by the scent of herbs and the hum of the bottling machine I'd installed in my shed. But it was a good tired, the ache in my bones a testament to my own creation, not to my servitude. My hands were still stained, but now they were stained with the evidence of my own success. My little brand grew a reputation for being exclusive, artisanal, authentic. People loved the story, the idea of this secret recipe passed down through generations. I was able to pay off the mortgage on my cottage. I even bought a small van to make deliveries. I was secure. I was independent. I was happy. A quiet, steady happiness that came from within, not from the approval of others. And then, as I knew she eventually would, she returned. I was in my workshop, calculating an order for a luxury hotel in the capital, when a sleek, expensive car I didn't recognize pulled up my gravel driveway. Amelia stepped out. She looked different.
Thinner.
The effortless glow she'd had was gone, replaced by a brittle, polished veneer. She looked around at the transformed property, the expanded garden, the professional signage, the busy workshop, and her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose in surprise. She had come expecting to find me in ruins, I'm sure. "Mother," she said, her voice attempting a warmth that didn't reach her eyes. I didn't get up. I just looked at her from my desk. "Amelia." The silence was awkward. She was the one who had banished me, and now she was the intruder in my world. "You're doing well," she said, a statement, not a question. "I am," I replied, my voice even. I felt a strange calm. The terrified, heartbroken woman from the boutique was gone. I didn't know the woman sitting in her place very well yet, but I knew she was strong. She launched into a long, rambling story about her married life, about the pressures of fitting in with Richard's family, about the constant entertaining, the financial strain of keeping up appearances. It was a monologue of complaints disguised as a conversation. She never once apologized. She never mentioned the wedding, or the words she had said. It was as if she had selectively erased the part she played in my destruction. Finally, she got to the point. Her wedding anniversary was coming up, a big party at their country club. She needed it to be perfect, and, she confessed, they were having some cash flow issues. Richard had made a bad investment. She said it all so casually, as if she were discussing the weather. Then she looked at me, a calculated, pleading look in her eyes. "I was thinking," she said, "you could help. A loan, perhaps. Or, a gift. For your daughter." The confrontation I had both dreaded and in a way, longed for, had arrived. But it wasn't going to be a shouting match. I didn't need to scream.
My new life was my response.
I stood up and walked over to the safe I had installed in the corner. I spun the dial, the clicks loud in the quiet room, and opened it. I took out a bank statement. I had been saving, consolidating my profits. The business was thriving beyond my wildest dreams. I walked back to the desk and laid the statement down in front of her. She looked at it confused. Then her eyes found the final balance at the bottom of the page. It was a little over 40,000 euros. Her breath hitched. Her eyes, which had been filled with a practiced, weary boredom, were suddenly sharp with avarice. This was the moment of truth. She saw the number, and in her mind, it was already hers. It was the solution to all her superficial problems. I let her look at it for a long moment, watching the greed play across her features. Then I spoke, my voice low and clear. "This," I said, tapping the paper, "is what my peasant face and my peasant hand have built. This is the legacy of the women you were so ashamed of. It's the price of sunshine and misty mornings and a secret recipe you never bothered to learn." I picked up the statement and put it back in the safe, closing the heavy door with a solid, final thud. "The wedding is in 2 days, you said?" I asked, my voice light. She just stared at me, speechless. On the day of her anniversary party, the day I was meant to show up and ruin with my presence, I did go to her town. But I didn't go to the country club. I went to the bank. And then I went to the wedding venue. She was there, in the grand entrance, greeting guests, a fake smile plastered on her face. She saw my van pull up and a look of pure horror crossed her face. I got out. I was not wearing a floral dress. I was wearing a beautifully tailored suit. My hair was professionally styled, and I carried a leather briefcase. I was no one's victim. I walked straight up to her, past the gawking guests. Richard was by her side, looking confused. I didn't say a word. I simply opened my briefcase and took out a large, ceremonial check. It was from my company, Elixir de Sofia, made out to the local women's shelter, a place that helps women get back on their feet after life has knocked them down. The amount written on the check was 40,000 euros. I presented it not to her, but to the manager of the club, who was also on the board of the charity, instructing him to make an announcement during the party. Then I finally looked at my daughter. I leaned in close, my voice a whisper only she could hear. "This is my gift. This is the money you wanted. It was earned by the peasant you threw away. I hope you and your guests have a wonderful time celebrating your success." I watched the comprehension dawn in her eyes, followed by a wave of disbelief, then rage, then utter, pathetic desperation. As I turned to leave, I heard a strangled sob. I glanced back. Amelia had sunk to her knees, right there on the marble floor of the country club, her expensive dress pooling around her. She wasn't kneeling out of remorse. She was kneeling before the magnitude of what she had lost, the fortune she had despised and tried to erase. I walked away without looking back. I didn't feel vengeful. I didn't even feel victorious. I felt free. My life now is quiet, but it is deeply, profoundly full. My little cottage is a home again, filled not with ghosts of the past, but with the warm, sweet scent of my work. The garden is thriving. I have a team now, other women who, like me, needed a second chance. We forage together. We bottle the elixir together. We run the business together. We are a small family, bound by our shared belief in the magic of starting over. I never heard from Amelia again. I sometimes wonder what happened after that day, but the curiosity is faint, like a distant echo. Her world of appearances and status is no longer connected to mine. My world is real. It is built on the earth, on tradition, on the strength of the women who came before me and the women who now stand beside me. The legacy I am building is not one of wealth, but one of worth. It's in every bottle of elixir we ship, in every woman I can offer a job to, in the quiet peace I feel when I walk through the woods at dawn. I learned that the most painful betrayals can sometimes be a brutal, but necessary, gift. They can burn your life to the ground, clearing the way for something new and stronger to grow in its place. My daughter's cruelty did not destroy me. It forced me to find the part of myself I had forgotten, the part that was connected to a long line of resilient, powerful, peasant women. I found my salvation not by chasing a life someone else deemed worthy, but by embracing the humble magic I already possessed. Today, I understand that the wounds of the past do not define who we are, but what we do with them. Yes, I am immensely grateful that you have listened to my story so far. If it has touched you, share it with someone who needs a light, and leave a comment with a word of strength and hope. Together, we are stronger.